Welcome to Inspire Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter Swoboda, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody, Happy New Year and welcome to a new decade. Thank you for joining me again in a new season of Inspired Change. For all of those who've been listening, welcome back. Anyone who's new, I hope you find this interesting, stimulating, and I certainly do hope that you'll take some good points out of this that are going to help improve not just your life, but also your relationships within the community that you live in. So, 2020, what is it going to bring? What are you going to do to make a difference to yourself and to others? Well, before I go anywhere, as you all know, Australia's been suffering from an absolute disastrous few months with bushfires. So the first thing that I want to do is to extend a tribute to all those volunteer and professional firefighters from Australia and overseas who've come to help us. You guys and women are surely the real superheroes in our age. To put yourself into harm's way to save not just your properties and your lives of the loved ones, but also that of your neighbours, of your community, that truly deserves special recognition. Unfortunately, one of the things that it has also done is it's demonstrated that not everybody steps up to the plate. And I'm going to leave that till a little bit later. So let me just round off and say a heartfelt thank you to all of those who fought so bravely and continue to fight bravely. It's truly a remarkable thing that you've done. So, a new season. What will that bring? So, in this new season, we're actually starting a new format. And initially, as you all know, the podcast was 5 minutes long. In this particular season, we're actually extending it to a weekly 20 minutes on our thinking about personal, family, and social change. I think this particular decade really requires some deep, soul-searching reflection. We're in a particularly difficult and confronting time. We're seeing things that we've not seen for 80 to 100 years in social dynamics and in how people are reacting to what is going on around them. The other thing that we're introducing in this particular period, in this season, is that we're going to have 4 sessions of an hour with some meaningful conversations with thought leaders. And I've got some ideas about this, and anybody who wants to provide some food for thought, please take some time to contact me and put your suggestions forward. So we'll certainly, as long as it sticks to the topic, which is inspiring change and making good men great, we'll consider whatever topic you raise. I want this to be as broad as possible because simply focusing on the individual is not going to be fruitful. It's not going to help us progress individually or as a community or globally. And it doesn't matter what people say about individualism versus the community. It's not a versus, it's an and also. All of us are clearly influenced by the society that we live in and the prevailing thoughts that are evident in our current society. And so there's some scary stuff going on, and I want you all to think about it. And I want you to think about what your role is in this. So, as I said before, one of the things that the bushfires have highlighted was that not everybody stood up and took their place in leadership. And unfortunately, that was very true of some of our key politicians. So the question is, from the perspective of making good men great and leadership, because great men lead as do great women, and they lead in conjunction with one another. So the question is, what was missing? How can we look at leadership in a much more productive sense, in a way that it makes a difference? And I'm not going to criticize anybody. I'm actually going to focus predominantly on the capacity for us to understand what really good leadership is. And let me start off with suggesting that any leadership that is based in patriarchal values is by definition lacking. Why? Because the values in patriarchy of being territorial, of being hierarchical and status conscious, of being acquisitional, of being competitive, evolves into a cultural attitude that discriminates and it disadvantages and exploits others for personal gain. There is no we in patriarchal leadership, only insofar as what I can get from the other. And to me, that is a very serious problem. So when I talk about leadership, I usually start off with a quote from Frederick Bayer. He says, "By a great man, however, we mean a man who, because of his spiritual gifts, his character, and other qualities, deserves to be called great, and who, as a result, earns the power to influence others." Now, with someone like that, one of the things that we can focus on is that someone like that deserves our trust. And one of the things that's really lacking currently in our society is a lack of trust in the media, a lack of trust in politicians, and a lack of trust in science. And this has become a very, very serious problem. So one of the things that I look at in effective leadership, what are the qualities of someone who's an effective leader? So I talk about the leadership cycle, and essentially strong leaders are very capable of establishing good relationships with those around us. And those relationships are based on cooperation, not competition. So a leader in that context is able to communicate a very clear vision that's encompassing. It doesn't just include a particular section of society or a particular vested interest groups. It's inclusive. So when I talk about good men going great, one of the qualities is that we're inclusive. We're not territorial. We're not restrictive in who participates. So firstly, good leadership is based on the leader being able to define a clear-cut vision for the future of all involved. He's able to form relationships that will support that vision. And she will be capable of communicating that very clearly and in an unambiguous way. The second thing a great leader is interested in is the cultural aspect. So what is it that we're talking about around culture? Well, the first thing is we come back to our vision. What's our vision? The second aspect is the values. And the core values that I like to promote in that context is to be inclusive, to be democratic and respectful, to be distributive, and to be cooperative. We need people to engage with each other. One of the main problems in our current society is that we are fragmenting. And when I work with men individually, or when I mentor them, or when I coach them, one of the biggest issues that I run across is that many, many men and it doesn't matter whether they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or older, feel isolated and alone and alienated. Once we perceive that we've reached our use-by date, that we are no longer functionally have a place, like being a CFO or being, a plumber. In other words, when we have retired, we lose our sense of belonging, our sense of purpose and meaning. Now, a healthy culture that's created encompasses people at all stages of life and from all walks of life, from all ethnicities, religions, and also ideologies. Now, sometimes those ideologies pit us against each other. And one of the things that I talk about is, the fact that patriarchy is an ideology that is corrupting. It is one which damages us individually as men and women and children, and it damages our culture, our society. And I find that unacceptable. So to me, in the terms of Philip Zimbardo, patriarchy is in fact a systemic problem that can create evil, and quite often does, so that we are confronted with possibly, the worst beliefs and attitudes and behaviors in people that otherwise are unnecessary. They're not something that we need to particularly engage in. As I said, patriarchy is psychologically damaging, it's culturally damaging, and it allows people to feel that they have a dominion over others. And this includes the environment. It's one of the things that's really interesting. There was some research that was done a while ago, but what it demonstrated was that the more patriarchal men are in their attitudes, the less likely are they to engage issues of ecology, climate change, and so on. So, in essence, patriarchy proves itself to be dangerous for our living future. It also creates what I call the hollow man. So from what's the psychology of patriarchy? Well, in some of the episodes, I've already hinted at the fact that, patriarchy teaches men not to engage emotionally well. We have a restricted emotional vocabulary. We lose our capacity to empathize effectively. Our level of competition means that someone's got to lose, and that can either be on the individual level or it's on a systemic level. Rather than looking at things holistically and looking at things in a way that allows us to create a long-term vision, because we need a long-term vision. To go from one election to the next is completely inappropriate. We need to have a capacity to resource what it is that we need in our society for the individuals to be healthy, for the society, the culture to be healthy, and for our future to be sustainable. Now, in that, we can actually, if I'm going to be, a bit corporate, we can measure performance. And one of those measures is social well-being and individual well-being. It also looks at the capacity for people to engage in a healthy way. In corporations, we often run engagement surveys, and certainly a lot of leaders are held accountable for when they have a very low engagement rate. We also look at morale and satisfaction. These are all measurable standards. There is nothing new in it. So economically, we need to start thinking as leaders about including those factors into our overall vision and the platform from which we measure success. It's not just economic. As a government, I cannot govern based purely on economic principles. Now, if a lot of people in leadership really understood economics, they would understand that economics is actually a subset of ethics. And one of the things that's been emerging very, very clearly in the last decade is that ethics and morality has been taking a dive. Every day our newspaper is filled with corporate and political scandals that demonstrate a clear lack of values, ethics, and morality. This is not sustainable. We need to return to a principle or to principles of governance that are based clearly and fundamentally in strong, constructive values with a strong ethic. We need to have regulation in place that keeps a check on both political people, but also on corporations and the relationship that they have with each other. So one of the things that is going to come up eventually is the individual is going to ask, well, this is a big thing. How can I influence that? Well, my comment is that each individual in our society, in a democratic society, has responsibility and is accountable for checking who it is that we engage with politically and in business as to their moral and ethical stance. If they're immoral and unethical, we need to disengage. We need to put checks and balances in place so that we are no longer part of a system that allows individuals to act, as Zimbardo says, in an evil way, or where situational demands become such that good people act in an evil, unhealthy way. It is imperative. Our success as a culture, as a humanity, needs to start tackling this. It is as important as our attention to issues of ecology, climate change, wealth distribution. Once we have those values and ethics in place, where they are based on sound morality, sound ethics, then we will create a society and a culture wherein the individual can thrive and the family unit can thrive and the community thrives. So I hope that's a good opening, some food for thought, and I'll be looking at some of those issues much more in detail over the next few episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Gunter, and thank you to our listeners. Inspire Change with Gunter Swoboda. Please join us every Wednesday for a new broadcast by visiting www.spreaker.com/show/inspire-change, which will feature all the ways you can listen. If you have comments or suggestions, email producer@studio3hollywood.net. Thank you and have an inspiring day.